This video is a conversation that I had with fellow psychonaut YouTuber, your mate Tom. Tom's channel is based on his experiences with psychedelics and spirituality, the places where those experiences have taken him, and the ups and the downs within that journey. Now, I've been following Tom's content since a few years now, and there are two things which I think really makes his stuff stand out from the kind of standard vlogging crowd. First is that he has a very honest, relatable quality about how he approaches these substances. The highs and the lows, the rough and the smooth. It's a very warts and all approach, which I really appreciate, and it's something I strive to do here on my own channel. The second is that I really like his style of filmmaking. He puts a certain cinematic flair into his work, which elevates it above your typical stuff here on YouTube. What Tom is doing is providing honest, rational discourse about these substances and their effects. And the more of that we can get out there, the better. And the fact that he wraps it all up in such a well-presented shell is just icing on the cake. In this chat, we go through various subjects such as our own experiences on ayahuasca retreats in Peru, spirituality. We talk a little bit about some of our peers in the psychedelic community, Leo Gura, and what conversations we would like to have to move things forward. So as my final upload for 2020, I bring you everybody's mate, Tom. Enjoy. So I'm here with fellow YouTuber and seasoned psychonaut, your mate Tom. You all right, Chief?
G'day. What's going on?
Yep. Awesome. Straight in there with the culture, mate. In fact, that's actually something I wanted to kind of like kick off with, because I think there's something about, I think that we got this kind of shared thing with English and Aussie where we have around this word mate, where it just becomes this kind of like Swiss Army knife of language. You know, it's like we kind of use it as like a greeting, or it could be like it's like affectionate. We use it to calm things down. You know, we use it with like total strangers or with our best friends. So it really sets this intention between you and the person you're talking to. Is that like the same in Australia, or is it just?
Yeah, 100%. And the word mate can be swapped. I don't know if I want to swear, but the C word is very abused over here.
You could swear like a trooper, mate. Where I guess that is thing I think English and Australia have in common, because some of the language which I will just throw in as punctuation into a sentence, like if you say that sort of stuff in like America, then you just crossed cultural boundaries of which possibly can never be repaired. So yeah, I mean, let's be political, and the C word, which I use it like non-stop. I like that's like a word of affection between me and my wife. You know?
Yeah, we used it here as well. It is a term of endearment, but I don't know. I'm like trying to just swear less as I get older. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just turning into a prude, but it's like it's pretty full on, because I forget that, like, yeah, in Australia it's fine, but then if I travel other countries in the world, then they kind of, every time I say, they're like, hey, whoa, what are you doing there? You know?
Yeah, yeah, you definitely, you've got to be like kind of culturally sensitive with it. But
yeah,
I think from where I'm from in the north of England, then we just have this kind of rich heritage of just what I think is like extremely creative, vulgar language, and it's fucking hilarious. It's just so some of the ways, and especially when you talk to like really old people, and the way they'll just glue these phrases together, it's almost like poetry of. In the way some of these things that was going on, I really miss that from where I live at the moment in Switzerland, because they just do not get it at all. And even this word mate, like it's like, why are you constantly using the word mate? It does, like, you know, because they're very formal. They've got this very formal sort of social structure. So
we probably got it from you anyway.
Well, we
remember, Australia is basically English convicts, and then we kind of
don't start wailing on me about colonialism, mate. You know, I'm sorry.
You're our oppressor. How dare you?
It wasn't me, mate. So yeah, it's really awesome to get the chance to talk to you, dude. I mean, you've been doing this for a while now, so I don't know how much of an introduction you need, but I just, maybe just describe what it is you do in your own words. Like, what's your overall sort of mission for yourself and your channel on YouTube?
It's kind of changed over times, but I guess what's stayed consistent is that I make videos about topics that I feel like talking about, pretty much. It started with obviously very heavily on psychedelics and reducing the stigma, especially with ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like the stigma has reduced drastically, and there's a lot of mainstream figures who are talking about this stuff. So my inspiration for reducing the stigma isn't as strong, because I feel like it's more education and harm reduction where I started to go towards. But lately I've been going more towards a kind of philosophical route and talking, kind of leaning more towards psychology and self-development, things like that. Integration.
I noticed that, man. I think that's something I'd like to sort of like pick your brains on a bit. I think I first came across your stuff, I think it was like probably 2017. Okay. And I think that you and I were probably in Iquitos at around about the same time. So
really?
So I think sort of early 2017, which I'm guessing from when you published the video, is when you were at Dreamglade, I think. And I was there at a place called Pulse Tours, which then became Arcana. Oh. And so yeah, it was kind of when I got back from my sort of retreat, and I was, you start sniffing around on the internet, looking, you try to soak up all this stuff about this experience, and I came across, which I think was your first sort of like documentary piece that you did on on ayahuasca, and yeah, I've got to say, mate, it's fucking weird watching your stuff because you go to all these same places that I sort of been to. Like I was watching one that you published recently, and I was like, that's Casa de la Gringa. I've been there. I stayed in that room there. So it really brings my memories like flooding back. Anyway, I just, with that first video you did on you sort of that ayahuasca retreat, I mean, I loved it. I thought it was such a good piece that you put together, mate, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was fucking brutal in its honesty. It was like, because I mean, there was like a sort of a turn of what happened on that retreat where I thought it was very like sort of brave in the transparency that you put out there of what can go down with this. And that's something I try and do a lot on my channel is these things are not all sunshine and rainbows. And I thought you really encapsulate that. But the other thing I really liked about it is that you definitely have a cinematic flair that you put into your videos. And I just wanted to sort of pick your brains up on that. Is that something you do like creatively as part of your filmmaking? Like, do you set out, like, do you know you're going to sort of do certain shots, or does that kind of like flair just come to you sort of naturally and it's just record stuff and put it together as you're editing it?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been like that. I just show up, don't really have a basic structure, and I just kind of record what I think looks cool and I piece it together. But of course, that's kind of like still an amateur way of doing it. So like as you progress, it's obviously, the more energy you put into pre-production, the better the final product will be. So now I'm trying to do more like actually structure it and know what I'm doing beforehand. But for the most part, it's always been just I record whatever and piece it together in the editing.
Yeah, I guess like the flip side of that is that if the more effort you put into pre-production, then the more you're kind of locking yourself into that and that's that kind of power. So you don't necessarily get this kind of free flow. I mean, it's the same, even when you do have like a conversation like this, you kind of make some sort of notes and stuff to have the thing going. But if you plan it out too much, it becomes a very stale kind of like, what do you think about this, Tom? What do you think about Tom? So
I guess it depends on what your goal is, because like the beautiful thing about a documentary is that you're documenting reality. So there's not, I mean, there's some pre-production you can do, but it's not like, let's say a short film. If you just go into it, just like, let's just record whatever, it's going to probably turn out to be a disaster. So I guess it depends on the medium you're talking about. Yeah. And
you've got this very sort of like gonzo element to what you're doing. Because, I mean, you are recording these things, but you are the subject and the sort of, you are sort of taking us on this journey. So it's really good. There was one bit in that ayahuasca piece, which I was just like, when I saw it, I was like, fuck, that's a really good shot. And it was one where it was before you think you actually go to the retreat and you stood there and a storm starts in the background. You're like, there's a storm coming. Yeah. Which just perfectly foreshadows what goes down. I was like, wow, that was, Did you know what you were doing when you set up that shot there?
No, it was all just accident. Yeah. It's funny because sometimes when I go into these things, it's like the universe just has my back. And it just like sets up all these beautiful shots. I'm like, oh man, I couldn't even have planned that,
Well, you have to pay the price with what goes on. So I'd like to sort of,
Storm's like coming, I know. I remember actually like editing that piece and I'm like, oh man, I forgot that I even said that. That's so crazy.
Well, that is like kind of like, it's like, one of the beautiful things when you're recording some of these stuff. And again, it's, some of these things that happens, and so yeah, you've just got to pretty much be recording all the time to try and catch all these moments, and then sift through sort of almost sometimes hours of stuff to get that 2-minute piece of magic. But that was an absolute piece of magic, mate. I've really got to tip my hat to you there.
Cheers,
So
bro.
I
Appreciate it.
mean, tell me, kind of, sort of unpack a bit of what went down in that video, because yeah, you went on this retreat, and I think like the first ceremony was all sort of like going well, and then I can't remember if it was your second or third ceremony, like this sort of shit hit the fan there, and
yeah, night 2.
Yeah, and I think the quotation there from was like the most traumatic event of your life by several orders of magnitude, which I think just like paints the picture. I mean, granted, that was a few years ago. Like, is it still that kind of? Would you stay true to that label, or
in terms of the intensity of the experience? Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say it was the darkest period of my life, because at least when that experience was over, I came back to reality, and I was, well, for the most part, fine. I didn't come out of that ceremony like, oh, now I'm just like screwed up forever or whatever. That was kind of like during the actual experience, whereas I had a much heavier experience with the boga, which kind of triggered this 9-month-long brutal existential crisis. That was like, yeah, that was definitely, in terms of like long term, that was the most traumatic. In terms of this, yeah, man, that was crazy, because I went to this ayahuasca experience. I brought my girlfriend along, so this was her first experience, man. And I still feel kind of bad today.
Was it your first experience, or had you been there?
No, I've been there. So I did ayahuasca 2015 for the first time. That's actually when I started the channel. I went to Kapitari. There's been a lot of controversy around that retreat since then, so I haven't.
Is that the one where it got a bit culty with it, where the guy was?
That too, and I heard some New Zealand kid overdosed from the tobacco purge, and he died.
All right, yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, and it was great. There was an undercover journalistic piece on that retreat. And it was just, yeah, ever since that happened, obviously business went down. But yeah, that was the first time I did it. And that kind of opened the doors towards this, whatever you want to call it, psychedelic spirituality, and just opening up Pandora's box. And then the second time where I returned to Peru, I went with my girlfriend, and just picking up from where I left off. My mentality going into this was like doing deep healing and kind of facing my shadow and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you got to be careful what you wish for. That's why I don't go into these things with that sort of mentality anymore. But that being said, I was going through a lot of shedding off a lot of trauma, and gone through like a lot of drug addiction, anxiety and depression, all that kind of stuff. And the first night was fine, man. Like I went through it was like a classic going through like this DMT labyrinth, Avatar land sort of reality. And then it was the second night, man, something just turned. I just went down to got plunged into the dark abyss and started to lose my mind. It was like the ayahuasca was just scraping whatever was left of my human mind, to the point where I couldn't even understand the concept of like just simple words like friend or Tom. And I was like, and then that just kind of spiraled into like this full-blown psychosis, because it wasn't like a ego death where like your identity just gets shed and then you're merged with the oneness. This was just pure sheer terror. And then I was like, oh no, something's gone really wrong. And it almost felt at the time like the spirit of ayahuasca was like trying to kill me. And then I just freaked out, and it just became worse and worse and worse and worse, and to the point where I was like screaming my lungs out. And I remember wanting to say goodbye to my girlfriend, who was like in the Maloka as well, because I thought that literally the only way that I could stop this was to kill myself, because the pain was so much. I remember actually like connecting with like the collective suffering of humanity across all time, and like really viscerally feeling what it's like to be like an African soldier, for example, who snorts meth and is forced to kill people, or someone else getting raped, or just like the worst shit you can imagine all put together. So it was too much. It was too overwhelming. I couldn't handle it. Even if you could tell me rationally speaking, like, hey man, this is, you're on a drug, this will pass, but the pain was just too much. I couldn't handle it,
Well, that's the thing when you're in that sort of space, and I think it's something I kind of like, because there is the kind of like a very hardcore sort of science textbook element to the sort of psychedelic community, and you know, whenever you sort of bring up anything spiritual, they're always like, oh, it's just drugs, it's just a, you know, oh, you just freaked out and stuff. It's like, yeah, but when you're in that moment, you cannot just rationalize yourself out of it. You know,
No way.
it's happening to you as real as anything. And when I was on that retreat again around the same time, I had a similar experience, not quite as dark as what you described, but certainly one where I was so detached from myself, and I was just freaking out, and people said I was just kind of flip-flopping all over the place, and they had to sort of take me at the Maloka and stick me in the shower, and I just shat my pants all over the shower, and so the things we had, mate. So yeah, I mean, it can be such a fucking an ass-kicking experience, and that left me completely shell-shocked. And so like the next night I was like, I'm gonna have to like
100%.
not drink.
And sometimes you don't actually realize how traumatic that experience was until like later down the road, because it was like my psyche was just like, okay, that was pretty messed up, but you're fine. And then like a month or two would pass and I'd kind of get flashbacks like, oh shit, dude, you're not okay. This was actually really messed up. This wasn't as simple as like, oh, it's just a bad trip, or, you know, it was just, oh, you're facing your shadow. It was something so much more, I guess cosmic is a word I can describe, but yeah, you can't rationalize these kind of things, because like while you're in it, you can't just be like, oh yeah, this is just a DMT that's attaching to your serotonin receptor, and it's like, how is that information going to help me in this situation? You know, it was just like
I mean, the word trauma just fits it perfectly, because that's what it is. You go through the event, and it leaves its kind of energetic sort of scar or whatever, and then coming down in the morning doesn't necessarily fix that. And then I think when you say it does, it can come back sort of like 2 weeks or a month later. I would pretty much say it's guaranteed to come back like 2 weeks, 4 months later.
Yeah.
Those kind of experiences, just bite you in the ass a bit.
I had sleep paralysis, I remember, like 3 times in a week after that retreat. And I've had sleep paralysis maybe once or twice in my life. Up to that point. I don't know what to do with that information, but it's something that's worth noting, I feel.
So what is it that makes you sort of like get back on the horse then? Because I noticed you again, you don't shy away from the dark topics, man. I've seen a few of your videos where it's this or this had a bad experience, or this where you felt like maybe you were sort of becoming dependent on a certain substance. What is it that sort of keeps you in this realm?
I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just some crazy Aussie guy who just doesn't learn his lesson. I don't know. No, I guess part of the answer is that I didn't want to leave it at that. I didn't want that just to be my last experience. And even the facilitators thought that I must have taken some drugs, because you're supposed to go on a diet protocol.
Yeah, sure.
They must have believed like, no, maybe this guy's like on some antipsychotic, or maybe he took some drug before and he just didn't tell us, which I didn't at all. Usually when I go into these things, I take it like ultra seriously. I take the diet very, very seriously. And I continue. I skipped one ceremony because they talked to us, and there's so many theories that you can go about this. You can go from a psychological perspective, and maybe it was some really messed up trauma that I repressed throughout my childhood. And, throughout my life, I've always kind of been darkness in a way, hanging out with the misfits, doing drugs, spending time in the underworld sort of thing, and rebelling against authority. So that part has sort of always been in me. Not anymore, because I've worked through that, and I realized that was just a part of myself that I needed to move past, because it wasn't serving me anymore. And then you could also take it as a spiritual perspective of, maybe I wasn't respecting ayahuasca enough. Maybe deep down I was doing it from this ego perspective and just wanting to make a YouTube video. And like, that was really my unconscious intention, even though consciously I was like, yeah, I want to heal, I want to do this and this. But really it was like, yeah, bullshit. You just want to make a video. Maybe that's another perspective from it.
It's a fun one.
Who knows?
I think it's particularly when you're doing something like this, like YouTube, you cannot help but have those thoughts, and I certainly had those thoughts, and particularly when I've been on retreat or something to get my ass kicked, then the thought just comes back, you like, you fucking dick, you did this to yourself, like, this is, and then like, and it does encroach into some things. Like sometimes you're trying to sit there like really connecting with yourself, and then the brain starts going, oh, I'll make a video about this like this, and I'm like, no, just give me a minute, just fuck off thoughts, let me have my moment. So it's one of those things you're trying to sort of like balance out. But I think maybe it was just part of your journey, and I think it's almost like, I think, a testament to your journey is that you did keep getting back on the horse and you did sort of kind of resolve these things, because it's not uncommon for people to have one of these, what call it, dark experience, and you just give it up at that. And I think that's possibly not the right thing to do, because then you've got this little bit of extra trauma on top of what you went there for in the first place.
Yeah, and deep down, and regarding all this dark experiences, like I've always felt like I've had something there to protect me, almost like a guardian angel or something, many times in my life. Like there's been so many times in my life where I should either be in jail or dead or gone down a much darker path, but it's like something kind of just brings me back, and so I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, I don't want to push my luck either. So I finally learnt my lesson when it comes to those sort of things. But man, yeah, it was really, really, really intense, especially like imagine my girlfriend being at that retreat and seeing her partner go through this psychotic breakdown, and it would have been really hard for her, and that's something that really I had to work through. Another thing as well, it could be like the responsibility that you have. It's like if you're a teacher or a spirit. I don't regard myself as a spiritual teacher, by the way, but just like, let's say, an educator.
We'll get into all that later on.
We will. I actually loved your video on Leo Gore, and I just challenged him to a debate, by the way, but we can touch on that later. But yeah, man, it was like, because I feel like when you're in a position of you're educating people on psychedelics, I feel like the karma comes back to you. So you've got to be like much more responsible with this stuff. Like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And it's like, I know it seems like narcissistic even to say that, but it is. You have like, when you're reaching a lot of people, especially susceptible young minds about these substances, then you have a much greater responsibility on your shoulders, and you got to take that seriously. You can't just start making, I'm just going to continue making silly videos, or just, whatever, I'm just going to make as entertaining as videos as I can. It's like, nah, man, you got like, this is serious stuff, especially when it comes to psychedelics. And so maybe it was also a punishment or a harsh lesson from the psychedelic gods or God, or I don't know, whatever it is, but from the universe that just like, hey man, careful.
I think you have to be a special kind of person to, particularly when you do move into some of these areas of responsibility. And the ones that jump out to mind, we're probably some people who we know here, but do you know, was Carolina at Arcana when you were there?
No.
There was, there's because I've been to Arcana a few times, and there was one of the facilitators. There was this person called Carolina, and just sometimes you meet facilitators, and these are people who've they've kind of gone, they've done a bit of service, and they're working with the medicine to help, and they just kind of they're moving through. And then there's some people who are just, I've got a gift for this thing, and the sort of the label that got applied to this one lady was like a spiritual nurse, because like, if she wasn't born to do this, then I don't know what was. There was just some people who just radiate just warmth and security and space out, and I'm just so grateful for those sort of people to exist. And people often like say to me like, Rob, you should go and work at an ayahuasca tree. I'm like, forget it. That's not me. I cannot be that person. Like, I'm a dingbat. Like, do not ask me to like shoulder somebody else's burden as they blow the sort of the dam of their psyche. And I think that's something people need to be careful of, particularly when they take on these roles, because it's kind of very common for people to have one of these experiences and think, oh, this is my calling, I want to do this. And I think you really need to do some self-examination. Like, is it really? And for the people who it is, I salute you. You guys are the best. Like those some of those facilitators are just angelic beings made manifest. But
100%. And it takes like, you got to know your role, and not everyone is meant to walk this path, especially playing especially the shaman role. That's why after these kind of experiences, it really shifted my focus. I'm like, oh, okay, no, I'm not supposed to go down this particular path of not that I ever wanted to be a shaman, No way. Actually, that's way too much responsibility. I couldn't even, because then you'd have to dedicate literally your whole life. I feel like for you to be like a legitimate shaman, you got to spend like decades on just working with one plant, let
Hmm.
alone like thinking that you can facilitate any type of psychedelic and it's all the same or whatever.
And
But no,
it's not a glamorous lifestyle at all. Like,
no,
it's
brutal.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, it's yeah, a very like you would have to be. I mean, they do sort of say that they get called to this. The role kind of chooses them. You don't sort of choose it. But
Mm.
I'm kind of in awe of those people. And when usually they're just so humble as well. These guys are just yeah,
The legit
next
ones
level.
anyway, because I feel like most shamans are probably full of crap and they're probably doing it out of ego. And there's a lot of that kind of that dark underworld in the shamanic world of
Mhm.
like one shaman gets jealous because another shaman starts getting success with their retreat and then they go into the astral realm and start putting poisonous darts and like just crazy stuff like that, man. Casting curses, like, man.
So So what
Full
do you
on.
think about that kind of collision between the sort of the traditional sort of things like shamanism, like what you get in South America, and say like the you know what's been kind of termed the psychedelic renaissance. That's so as these things then blossom out of the cultural setting, and now they move into places like sort of Europe, and I'm not sure what the situation is down there in Australia. What do you think there should we be trying to sort of import the full sort of shamanic traditional stuff, or should we? Is there something to the new age stuff? What's your kind of position on that?
Well, I don't know if I'm in a position to say what we should and shouldn't do, but I personally, I think that we should. Well, I just said that we shouldn't do anything, and I was like, yeah, we should do this. But per personally, I like tradition. I like uh,
Mm,
honoring the sacrament and not kind of. I'm not a huge fan of like the new age way of doing it because especially with these substances, it's like really serious stuff. And it doesn't mean that like you have to do it in the Amazon or you have to do it in a particular situation. But there are many people who kind of serve under these guys. They do an apprenticeship and they kind of honor that lineage or they honor that tradition and then they carry it and they do it with like a level of love and respect and responsibility. As long as you're doing it with that and it's genuine, you're genuinely called to do this and you do the work, even more importantly, because that intention doesn't really mean much. It's a starting point, but it's about doing the work as well. But as long
yeah, I
as
think
you're
it.
doing it that way, then
Yeah, and I think it gives that framework as well. That's what I like about the traditional stuff is that because we don't have that kind of culture here, so it's such a kind of a leap between you know me, your average guy from sort of the north of England, and the psychedelic realm of transcendent what the fuck's going on. That even just to sort of import a bit of that culture, or, when you put yourself in that setting
mm,
with someone to sort of guide you, it's something. It gives you something to sort of hang on to. You can follow the Icaros. You can sort of put export your trust a bit into a framework that's worked for sort of thousands of years. So I think there's sort of value in these things. But I was talking to a guy last night who was, and this was particularly around the sort of the culture that sprung up around 5-MeO DMT, which is
yeah,
people as a sort of it used to be that DMT was like the top of the psychedelic tree, and then it was like, well, actually, no, ayahuasca. No, it's kind of everyone's kind of it's.
yeah.
I think the focus on 5-MeO was like the ultimate experience,
Right.
but
Until a new
but the,
substance gets discovered, and it's like, no, actually, no, 5 that's child's play. Now it's this, and then
yeah,
eventually down the line, nah, 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 that's bullcrap. Actually, this is the top. It's just gonna keep
but
going forever, I feel.
well, there isn't really a sort of any sort of tradition around that. I mean,
Mm.
there's a sort of there's a few minor things around doing this going like the Bufo route, but still it's not got the same kind of
That's true.
history to it as something like ayahuasca. So I was talking to this guy and he was very sort of opposed to the sort of the traditional approach because he thought it was just kind of like importing stuff with no value and it was better to just sort of like jump in and face the experience for what it is. And it was interesting. I could agree with what he said, but I still thought that traditional framework has a place. And I think
Mm.
as I've gotten more into this, I found myself getting kind of less cynical of the power of ritual. which I used to be very, very cynical of. I was like, yeah, just fucking give me the drugs. I know what I'm doing. And now I'm sort of much more open to that.
I resonate with that attitude. Yeah, it's like that rebellious to authority. Like, I don't need anyone. Just kind of.
I know what I'm
talking about. I want.
I've done drugs. I know my shit.
But what I like about these traditions is that the substance itself is like just the cherry on top. You know, it's not like the main event. It's all about the preparation, the actual ritual, the ceremony, and then the integration phase. And I think that's very useful, because if it was literally just about taking the drugs, then everyone would be transformed after having a psychedelic experience long term, you know, but which obviously isn't the case. So it's all about the preparation and integration phase.
Well, that's a kind of an interesting segue, because I know you've just recently spoken to, I don't want to murder the guy's name, but Brian Murakeshu, is it? Wrote the Immortality. Okay, I'm such a heathen.
How dare you, sir?
So, yeah, and I've just finished that book, and that absolutely blew my mind. And of course, like the central theme of that book is really based around this tradition of Eleusis, of the whole thing which led you up to sort of drinking the psychedelic potion was like a year-long process, and all these kind of steps that you went through. And I've got to say, I watched your chat with Brian. I was super, feeling a little pang of jealousy, like, oh, he got to talk to, because I'd love to talk to Brian. So what's your thoughts around that? Do you think, is, because when I was hearing about all these traditions of Eleusis and how it sort of lasted so long, and obviously it's so far in history, it's hard to get a sort of a read on it, but it did seem like that preparation led to an extraordinary effect of, even like people sort of coming in from the Roman Empire and stuff like that, just kind of blowing mind. So do you think we need sort of more of that kind of the rich, like the diet thing you just mentioned, which is something I also kind of honor when I'm doing a retreat, and I think it flicks a switch, I think, in your mind, even if there's just saying, I am preparing for this, I am I am putting myself in this mode. So would you sort of think that we need more of that kind of ritual?
It doesn't have to be that specifically, but definitely some sort of ritual and an ethos that we can follow, because especially in this culture right now, we're kind of going towards that anti-God kind of destroying authority, chaos, it's like that cycle that we're going through right now. Even in Revelations, right? It sounds very Revelations right now where we're living. And yeah, man, I think it's definitely important to have some sort of a ritual and to take the preparation phase seriously. And it's sort of like, it's easy. Like, really, if you think about how much skill does it take to eat a heroic dose of mushrooms?
Yeah, fuck all.
It's this. All you have to do is this. Open your mouth. That's it. Anyone can do it. And it's like, it's easy to go into the spirit realm, download infinite knowledge, but can you change your diet? Like, do you clean your room? Simple things like that. Like, how do you carry yourself in everyday life? Are you treating people with respect? Like, it's just these little tiny things, but the little tiny things reflect the bigger picture. So I would even go as far to say that if you can't do something as simple as like exercise or eat a healthy diet, and then you want to jump straight to the psychedelic experience, like I don't know, it all depends on how you do it, man. So I think that having some sort of a ritual and like honoring these sacraments, and I'm not saying that like in a dogmatic sort of like it has to be in this specific way, because I don't know, there's obviously different cultures do it differently, but there are also some universal patterns, I feel. Like whether you're talking about the Native Americans or the South Americans or the Aztecs or the Australian Aborigines, I feel like all these cultures have a similar sort of thing of honoring the sacred and not just taking it for like, yeah, let's just take drugs and have fun sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it cultivates, the lack of that cultivates this kind of like magic bullet thinking, in that, like you say, and I've said this a few times myself, the hard work is not drinking the cup of ayahuasca or whatever. Like, anybody can do that. It's what comes afterwards. And I think this is where you see people who do not have, don't have a good reaction to it, because they think this solves all their problems. It's just here, and not necessarily prepared to go home and and maybe ditch that toxic relationship, and maybe, yeah, maybe going standing in the pub all day is not the best thing, and maybe you do have to change your diet, and maybe
Exactly.
maybe you have to do this some big self introspection. But then, and I think then for the people who don't do that, then you get this unfortunate situation whereby they come down from the afterglow, and then wondering why it stopped working, and it's like it gave you the kick up your ass you needed, but you have to sort of roll with it then.
Exactly, because it doesn't actually, the psychedelic experience doesn't actually give you anything. It only shows you a glimpse, but you got to walk through that door, and that comes with everyday reality,
Yeah.
And certain people, even so I'm speaking from experience as well, and many people that I know who are in this field kind of fall into the spiritual ego trap, where they think that having psychedelics give them like a truer perception of reality, or they have special knowledge, and that they shouldn't hang out with low vibrational people, and they stop hanging out with their family and things like that. And it's like Ram Dass said, man, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. Like, that is the true ultimate test. Have a dinner with your family and actually see how you react,
Just be a good human being, just like, it's, I mean, yeah, it seems so basic, but it's, I think the simplest truths really are the sort of the truest ones. And I guess this all sort of like packages together into, I think if you describe yourself as like a spiritual person, but that word has a lot of baggage around it. So
yeah, I'm trying to take it back.
I know, rightly so, mate. Me too. But it's, I do find myself kind of cringing at it, just because it's because my own skepticism, and I come from a very sort of atheistic, sort of cocksure background, where I know what's going on. I've got this universe thing sussed. Don't give me your bullshit. And then after having a few of these experiences, I was like, okay, all right, universe, you win. I'm going to shut the fuck up. So I guess I would like to sort of, for us to be able to reclaim that world, because I think we both know that when you have one of these experiences, it's just the word for it. There is no other word for it. It's like, okay, I'm having a spiritual experience. I get it now. But what does that kind of word mean to you? How
to me, I would even go as far to say that this physical reality is the spiritual dimension. This is all spiritual. Like, even if you look at it from like a quantum physics level, it's all vibration, it's all sound anyway. None of it's like as physical as we think it is. But I think that this is sacred, like the human life, just walking on this earth, having awesome friends, relationships, like living your purpose, like just basic human stuff. Like, that to me is the spiritual path. I think that psychedelics just give you a glimpse and a reminder, especially if you're kind of stuck in this materialistic paradigm, that actually there is something a lot more profound going on. And then that kind of shifts your perspective, and then you go back to this human reality, and you're like, oh, okay, this is the trip. Life is the trip.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I take it anyway.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as like it's just that kind of aligning to that higher power, and the higher power can be anything. And some people externalize that into sort of God or whatever sort of religion they want to, but it could even be like the spirit of humanity, or the best version of yourself. And I think I think that's one of the benefits of these kind of experiences. You can feel that alignment for a moment. It's like, okay, yeah, this is who I want to be, or this is where I want to be, and it gives you then a kind of a map to get there. But you still have to go and then do that legwork yourself to get there. It's not, you don't just walk out sort of floating like, okay, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
And then that's the challenge then, to keep yourself on that path, I think.
Yeah, and again, it depends on where you're at and like why you're doing these things. Because I've kind of fallen into the trap of like maybe returning to the psychedelic experience a little bit too soon, and not giving that breathing space to really integrate. And like, oh, how can I get more knowledge? And again, it's like kind of that ego, how can I gain knowledge? How can I get? Instead of just letting it go and seeing whatever comes up, what comes up, And it doesn't always have to be opening Pandora's box and getting a terabyte download of knowledge. It's like sometimes I find myself like in the past going to a psychedelic experience, wanting to gain knowledge. And then it's like, hang on, dude, you've got like 5 books in your room that you haven't read. There's your knowledge, you know what I mean? Like, I think we take books for granted, and there's a lot of profound knowledge that humans have kind of worked their whole life through thousands of years to really structure these things,
Yeah, and again, that is something then you then have to do the work on doing in reading the book. It's again, we're in this kind of age where we all want everything. No, download the sort of the quick version. It's like, yeah, I bet you sit down for a weekend and just read the book. It's like, fucking book.
Read the foundations of philosophy. Learn some mathematics. You know, some basic religion or history. It all kind of accumulates into this bigger picture thinking. You know.
Yeah. So I wanted to pick your brains a bit on, because I saw you did a couple of videos around having a spiritual crisis, which, you know, for a lot of people, that is the kind of the path to spirituality. Something has to happen to get there. And I just wondered, yeah, like for you, is that something that's kind of like still ongoing? Have you kind of resolved that period of your life now?
Oh yeah, no, I've resolved it for quite a few years now. That's why I feel confident to make these videos. Not that I don't think it's valuable to be vulnerable and make videos about it, even if you're going through it. But I also think there's a danger of, let's say, I don't know, maybe there are a lot of people out there who will give advice on how to overcome depression, but they're still depressed. You know what I mean? And I think there's make sure that you actually overcome the problem before you put yourself in this authoritative place of, hey, this is how you overcome it, but you haven't actually done it yourself. Yeah,
and again, like we said earlier, I think it's only a few people who should even put themselves in that authoritative place to say anything about it. Like for most of us, just shut up and just be glad we got through it.
Yeah, but I don't want to say like, oh, I'm over it, but I am. I haven't experienced a wave of like existential despair or depression or anxiety for years, like literally years. So yeah.
So I just wanted to sort of unpick that a bit, because I think there, you know, some of these things do become kind of buzzwords and stuff like that. So I just wonder if you could sort of like pass out what's a spiritual crisis is one thing, and then because some people I think mistake that for like a bad trip. You know, it's like certainly a bad trip can lead to a spiritual crisis thing or be a stepping stone to it. But yeah, would you agree that these are kind of like different?
They are. Yeah, one can relate to another, but it doesn't imply the other, if that makes sense. So yeah, for sure, because a bad trip, it could be going through like a perceived spiritual crisis in the moment, but then once it's over, you could just go back to normal and be like, whew, that was crazy. I'm glad I'm back here, sort of thing. But once I had an iboga trip where I had that experience, but then when I went back to normal, it shifted my whole philosophy on life. And with the spiritual crisis or the dark night of the soul, and you know, I have a more of a religious perspective on this, and I think that it's when your connection to God gets severed. It's like you get removed from that connection, and then you're in this abyss of meaninglessness and despair, and you're just a speck on this universe with absolutely no meaning. Nothing matters. This earth is just a satanic prison that in the end of the day, we're all going to die. Everyone that you love is going to die. It's just a sick joke, basically, like that kind of mindset.
You've done me now, mate. This is so
sorry if I triggered any crisis, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, you just got to work and going into that path of meaning. You know, back to God, I guess. And I guess if you're materialistic and skeptical, then it's hard to break free from a dark night of the soul, because you need to break free from that rational, materialistic paradigm. Otherwise, it's very hard. It's that's why it's so easy to go into a nihilistic paradigm. You know, and I was there. I really tried to break free from it, and it was difficult, especially when you have, like, I have a very hyper analytical, logical mind. So it's like that has to fit. I can't just believe, like, someone tell me, like, oh, no, but there's meaning and there's God and everything happens for a greater purpose. It's like, yeah, it's great for you to tell me that, but I need to, like, logically work my way there and also feel it. So it has to harmonize on all, like, reason, logic, intuition, et cetera, et cetera.
And you don't know how to do these things at all. You know, like when I've been having sort of moments like that, someone says to me, like, you know, you need to surrender. You're fighting. It's like, I don't know how I don't know how to surrender. Like, it's because you're so caught up in your own bullshit at the time. And like I say, specifically, if you sort of got these kind of like analytical minds and you're looking for X equals Y equals, you know, solve the equation. And I saw, I was watching some other guy on YouTube, and he came up with a great line, which was, you know, when you're in this state where you need to try harder, actually try softer, just try not to resist and let it go. But I still struggle with it with some of my experiences where it's just like how I know where I want to get to, but there's just whether you call it sort of an ego blockage or an emotional blockage stuff, and it's definitely not an easy thing to get to. So again, I think these kind of ritual elements or any framework you can have that helps you get there is a positive thing. And I wanted to ask you because I did notice that there has been a kind of lot of the sort of like religious references and stuff like surfacing in your videos, and particularly with your recent conversation with Stephen Bankars, is it? So is that like a conscious shift towards religion, or are you kind of like exploring these concepts as an overall part of this like spiritual landscape?
It is conscious, but it's also something that I feel like was in the making for many years now. I just didn't know it. I feel like my values, my core values, and the way I think about life and philosophy, it was always there. I just didn't have a name for it. I just thought it was like, oh no, it's a spirituality. But it's all that structure is already there. You know, people have put it together for a long time.
I think it is for a lot of us because, and it's just something that's dormant. But we can see it even in our culture that all the stuff that tends to become super popular in culture has got this mystical element to it. Like sort of the Jedis and the sort of
dude,
the
awakening. That's all religious as fuck, dude. All that.
Absolutely. And you feel it, when you first watch something like The Matrix and you see Neo get it and like come back and like just everyone in the cinema is like, yes, Neo, and you identify so much with that, but yet we struggle to accept that outside of the kind of outside of the cinema or outside of the video game, and it's weird.
It's a battle between our left and our right brain, I feel, because it's our right brain who watch these movies and it's like, yes, meaning, God, religion. That's really what we're saying in our unconscious, but our left brain is like, oh, no, it's all materialistic, and it kind of hyper-analyzes it, and then it stops us from going forward.
Yeah. And I noticed you made a couple of references which seemed to be from the kind of the Jordan Peterson playbook, who I absolutely love, and I was very lucky to get to meet Jordan Peterson when
really? Oh,
yeah. He was here in Switzerland when his daughter was having one of her surgeries, and I got to go and sort of chat with him for a few minutes, and just awesome dude.
Awesome. He opened the doors actually towards religion for me, but like unconsciously, because he kind of gives a more psychological perspective on like the Bible and things like that. And I'm like, oh wow, I never thought of it that way. I didn't go full deep, but it was just seeds that planted that didn't sprout until a couple years later. And I'm like, I'm going to see what this thing's about. Why not? But just for those listening, I don't actually distinguish between spiritual and religious anymore. I feel like if you believe in God, you're religious. I think the term spirituality really just means you're just cherry picking from all sorts of different religions and then making your own thing. Whereas religion is a little bit more structured, I feel.
Yeah, I would say religion, it's similar to like we talked about, this kind of traditional framework. So it's, you are putting it into, a language or sort of a narrative or whatever you want to call it, that kind of bootstraps you from zero into an understanding of something and a way of conceptualizing these things. Because again, just like we talked about with the Matrix things, you don't necessarily understand what it means. You just feel that it means something, and it kind of means everything, but you've not quite got the terminology for it, and it's
exactly. And it takes many years to really even begin to grasp it. You know what I mean? Like I said, I feel like to even understand religion, you should have a foundation of like philosophy, like logic, understand mathematics, history, culture. You got to put all these things together before you can even start grasping what it means. Because I feel like even theology is basically a really advanced form of philosophy. It's a branch of philosophy, but it's really about the study of God in a sense, which is like very it takes a while. I'm still a noob. I'm just like kind of still dipping my toes in these waters, but just want to learn more about it.
Did you say then you would sort of class yourself as religious now then, or?
Yeah, well, I believe in God. I believe in objective reality. I think that we should I think there is a right or wrong. I think we should do the right thing, be a good person. That to me is what religious means. So by those definitions, then yeah, I'm religious.
But is the God that you would believe in, is it one of the sort of in one of the books, or is it sort of your own sort of ideal of a higher power?
I don't have a particular, because again, I'm still kind of going through this, so I don't want to say it But I would say that when I say God, I just mean the creator of the universe, that the substantial reality that permeates all of existence. It's more of a hermetic definition of God, but that's kind of what I resonate with.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing, and I think that's what I like.
Absolute reality. That's what God is. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's what I like about Jordan Peterson's stuff is that, I mean, he's unpicking things like the Bible in his biblical series, but he's analyzing it from all these kind of different angles, and you don't have to be religious at all or a Christian to get anything.
Right.
Definitely. And so it's never even particularly clear what the God figure that Jordan Peterson sort of. It doesn't really go into that in sort of too much details, but it's certainly some sort of higher power, and I think one way that can be manifested is through, even the Christian Bible, which I would have completely dismissed, a few years ago, and I think now I'm sort of, I mean, I did read the Bible, but I read it so cynically.
I would recommend reading like because I've been going kind of reading the Orthodox tradition, which is like the original church. But that reading like a study Bible really helps grasp the Bible a lot easier because it has like footnotes. Because you have the Bible and then you can like interpret it in so many different ways, but then the footnote is like, this is actually what it means. So just to make it a little bit easier, and you can take it for what it's worth. I'm just going through it because I feel like it's at the very least, it's important history to understand, because it's the foundation of all Western culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is it's also a snapshot of how our ancestors were thinking. Like if nothing else, it's just something made them sort of capture these things in a certain way, and I think that's something I've come to appreciate from it, which I didn't before. Whereas before I was kind of looking for ways to like nitpick of like, oh well, that's clearly bullshit. Well, that's clearly bullshit. Now I'm sort of like, all right, well, this is how they were thinking at that point in time.
And there are different layers to understanding these. Like, there's like the literal form, there's the symbolic, the allegorical, and it's all that's the paradox of it. It's not just like, oh, it's just literal or it's just symbolic. It's all of them. Yeah. So that's this. I don't know, man. I reckon it's one of those things that you could study for like 20 years and still just be scratching the surface of.
Yeah, absolutely. But really, I think what you're really doing is scratching your own surface. That you kind of I kind of see it a bit like something, like almost like a psychedelic experience, or like something like tarot or something like that, whereby what you're really doing is kind of manifesting what's going on with you through these stories. Why do these stories resonate with you? Because some things you just you can read and they do, like the mystical element just pours out of it. When you read some of the stuff in like Revelations, it's like I have no idea what that means, but fuck me, it means something.
It's really, really, really deep. It goes mystical as fuck, man. Like I know like a lot of Western people like to go to the Eastern philosophy because of its mysticism, but man, it's all there. In Western, sure. Really, it's all there. I think that it's even just like a rebellious nature to just kind of go against the status quo. Who knows what it is, but it's just a fascinating story. I'm going into it just like I'm reading. It's just a very interesting story, and just even reading it, I'm like, oh man, there's so many movies that we watch that's like based on all this kind of stuff, which I find very fascinating.
And that's one of the things I liked about the Immortality Key book, was sort of exploring even where that, what we call the sort of the Bible is how that came together from sort of like the Greek culture. And I was completely unrelated. I was in Greece on a family holiday in like September, and this is before I started reading the book. Nice. So I was doing all the tourist stuff and visiting. I was in Athens, and I was like, I mean, it's amazing when you see it. I was just like, what makes people put this kind of thing together? Like, because you go to Athens and this big hill, and then the temple's up on the hill. It just dominates the skyline. It's like, yeah, this was some effort for them to get all this stuff up here. And then I got back and started reading the Immortality Key, and I was like, all right, well, that totally makes sense now. Yeah, it's like a temple that is honoring this psychedelic. They'd seen it in this vision, and then they were trying to sort of manifest it on Earth. And then it kind of makes total sense within that framework. And I really sort of liked what Brian did with that book, and sort of putting together how these sort of traditions of Christianity may have emerged from the Greek traditions that came before it.
Yeah, or even how the Christians were oppressed, man, for hundreds of years. Like they were getting thrown to the lions because of what they believed. Like crazy stuff. And then the Romans kind of just took over. And then, all right, we're taking over. Get out of here.
Yeah, this is ours now. So I guess we're going from the sort of like Christianity. That gives us a nice way to circle back round to spiritual gurus, and one that's on both our radars is Leo Guru, who I will absolutely say is a fascinating character. Not necessarily, I think, for the reasons he thinks he is. But you mentioned a few times that you would
go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's stuff to unpick on that guy. But I know that you've mentioned a few times that you want to have some sort of dialogue with him, and as have I. And I think we both sent him sort of invites on multiple occasions.
I've wanted, and I'll just say on the record that I've watched literally thousands of hours of Leo Gura. He was one of my early teachers that I followed. For my and it was very crucial on my path to self-development. But once he started taking psychedelics, that's when he started to lose his marbles. And started to go more into this cult-like following and kind of just believing in his own fluff and never really. And this is the problem with New Age teachers, is that you never, I want to say never in absolute, but 99% of the time, you will not see a New Age spiritual guru actually debate with someone who has a different idea. Like they'll never really dialogue with people who have a different perception of reality. They'll kind of just stick with their own bubble and then kind of just hear their own echo chamber, and it kind of builds like this cult-like following. Yeah. And it's the classic signs, man. It's the classic signs. And I like Leo as a person. I just think he's misled in thinking that direct experience equals truth, because basically that's where his argument falls under. It's like he'll give you all these arguments, blah, 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 blah. You just have to take 5-MeO-DMT and have a direct experience. Like that's really the foundation of his argument, which of course it's like quicksand. You know, you can't depend your whole perception on reality because of an experience, a sensory experience that you've had. I think that's a dangerous spiritual trap. You know, we have to distinguish between interpretation of an experience and the experience itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I would pretty much mirror everything you said there, and I've said a few times, even though I've been, very critical of some of the stuff that Leo's said. I've openly said I think he's done some great work, some insightful work.
He's a smart guy. He's a smart dude, man. Very well read.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's part of the tragedy around sort of him, because I think that if he did challenge himself a little bit to come out of that echo chamber, I think it would do him some good to have to sort of work through some of these ideas. And that's why I put some more stuff out there. So I'm not trying to tear down Leo's entire channel or debunk or say everything he's done is bullshit, but I do sort of, and I'm always very specific, say, look, this thing that you say here, this is just fucking nonsense. And but for anybody who gets value out of Leo's stuff from like 3 years ago, like I'm not trying to take that away from you at all.
Like you said, it's not him as a person; it's the ideas that we're criticizing here.
Yeah, and also then the further to the sort of the ideas, I think the audience around him has now become quite toxic. I think, and is and a lot of the times when I'm sort of saying stuff about Leo, or even perhaps being a bit of an arse towards Leo, really what I'm doing is I'm being an arse towards some of the just insane levels of cult mentality, which is stuff that Leo himself may not necessarily think, but his audience will sort of think and will. So, because I don't think Leo necessarily believes in a lot of the things. Not that he's being insincere, but I think of some of the stuff he says kind of perhaps metaphorically. I think some of the stuff he says absolutely he does believe in it, and I think some of that's wacky in itself.
Oh yeah. Have you seen his enlightenment video in real time? He says, I am God. I am omnipotent. I have infinite knowledge. And then the Amazon guy knocks on his door and he's like, yeah, like kind of treats him like crap. So that's all I find funny.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Because I think he's just done another one recently.
Like, kind of like we're all one, we're all love. But then the Amazon guy who comes, he's supposed to be, treats him like crap. See, again, it goes to show it's like the ideal perception of reality, but then in actual reality, look how you're acting. You know what I mean?
Well, I rattled his cage just this last weekend because I don't know if you've been seeing this whole thing with this guy called Connor Murphy, who's basically like been idolizing Leo, and
he's gone towards that crazy path as well.
Yeah, and sort of he was kind of like looking to Leo for help, and Leo was just calling him a lunatic and just say no, you're embarrassing me. And I was like, dude, this guy is saying your exact spiel back at you, and you're calling him a lunatic. Do you not see the like irony here at all? And yeah, so I managed to actually get some sort of response out to Leo on his forums, where he did actually say to me that he would be open to having a discussion, and then he kind of backtracked on it later. He said, no, you can post your things in my forum. I thought, yeah, fucking, I'm not doing, I'm not.
I challenged him today as well, because I've challenged him a few times just to go, to have a friendly debate about these things, and I think it's healthy for him. That's the problem about cult leaders, is that they'll just stay in their little bubble and never really challenge themselves. I mean, they'll challenge themselves, but it's all sort of like this mental masturbation, just them having a dialogue with themselves instead of actually getting challenged by someone else. And I think that what's really the reason why I'm passionate about this topic in particular is because you see a lot of young susceptible minds who start to follow these kind of ideologies, and they their psyches start to break apart, and they have like this crazy existential crisis, and they become lost, and they become basically solipsists,
Yeah,
they don't know what reality is.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my issue with what Leo does. I will give Leo full credit for. I think he's had some very insightful experience, and he seems to be managing things in his own way. But I've heard him referring to himself as a spiritual master, and I think you're not even. This is just bad comedy. Like
this is what I find. Well, one of the things that I find funny is that he thinks that he can have an experience of being God, but he can't even have an experience of being another human being. Like could he transfer his consciousness and actually understand my essence and what I believe? No, of course not. It's impossible. So what makes you think that you can do it on the actual absolute God itself?
Yeah. I think that's what we're seeing with the Conor Murphy situation, is that he has adopted this kind of Leo sort of teachings wholesale, and I think it's completely blown his fucking mind. He doesn't seem to be having a good time with it. And I feel very sorry for him. And I think as well with the cult aspect of it, because I think there is a cult aspect to what's going on there at Acacia, but I don't necessarily think it's coming from Leo. I think
it never is.
That's the danger with these cults. They happen around you, and often what you see with them is that the leader actually doesn't have control of the thing. The cult becomes bigger than them, and I think that's certainly my experience of dealing with the actualized audience, is that these guys are fanatical, and I've had them sort of completely argue with me that Leo is all these things. He has all these powers. He's visiting them in the dreams. He's all these all these kind of like psychic events, and I'm not sure Leo himself would even agree with half that shit, or maybe he would. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he's that far into it. Who knows? But again, I would also like to talk to him. So I think we could extend the invitation. I think we could have either you or myself would have a friendly, good faith conversation.
Yeah, no. But there's no ill will here at all. It's like tough love sort of thing. I don't think he has good friends around him who actually calls out on his bullshit. That's why it's good to have friends around you that are willing to call you out on your bullshit. Because when you don't, and you just have fanatic followers who praise what you say all the time, it's impossible not to let that affect your ego, and then you start having like this holier than thou messiah complex sort of thing. It's important to get pegged down a little bit. He's flying too close to the sun, and his wings will burn off if he keeps going the way he goes.
But how do you manage that then? Because I think in terms of sort of because I often my channel is I'd say is very small in the grand scheme of things, and even now you feel that ingress of the audience into your into your life, And Leo's channel, I think at one time was quite big. I think it's actually not as big as what it looks on first look, but still he has this very passionate audience sort of who will, when he does one of these things of like something, have some kind of experience, they will egg him on to further things. How have you found sort of managing that? Because I would say probably your channel and your audience is at least as big as Leo's, even if it doesn't look that in terms of subscribers.
I am, like I said, I'm kind of rebellious by nature, and as soon as I sense that the crowd kind of have this dogmatic view on reality, I'll just challenge myself, and I'll just make videos kind of challenging certain ideas that I know is going to be controversial, even within the psychedelic community. And then that kind of stirs up a little bit of backlash. So I do it to myself a little bit. I like to peg, maybe it's the Australian in me, because we kind of go through like this tall poppy syndrome. So as soon as you start to grow a little bit, you just got to peg yourself down. And plus I have an amazing girlfriend who always calls me out on my bullshit, no matter what. And that helps to humble me. And also I have good friends who also call me out on my bullshit. Not just I don't just hang out with like spiritual people floating in the ether who just agree with everything that you say. I do not like that. You need to hang out with some real people. It's hard to find real friends, but they're there.
It is, man. It is, but yeah, like I say, having a sort of that support network. I've got myself, having a wife and 2 kids as well. That shit will ground you quick, man. When you've got. Yeah. So yeah, I think what I tend to see with those guys who do get a bit sort of lost in it is you soon see that they don't seem to have this. Yeah, they're kind of like solitary sort of lone wolf types. And again, that then I think, I'm sure I could end up in exact same state if.
And also with the podcast that I do, I like to invite people from all different sorts of walks of life, even if they don't agree with me, especially if they don't agree with me, if they would, if they'll come on, of course. I think it's important to challenge my idea. That's why I want to get I actually invited a vegan activist, for example, want to challenge, because I'm not a vegan anymore. So I want to talk to him about that. And also a materialist atheist, which is complete opposite end of the spectrum from what I believe. But it's important to talk to people who don't agree with you. As long as they're cool and likable, of course.
It's good faith. I think that's what it is. So it's, if you, which I think I guess is this kind of the spirit of which you and I would sort of want to talk to someone like Leo. It's like we're not saying you're going to necessarily agree with them. And again, there's this challenge, but it's not necessarily an arsey challenge. I'm not trying to rip someone a new arsehole or debunk them or anything. But this is how we grow, I think, is through this kind of, challenge response, make me think about stuff and
putting their ideas to the test, because that's how logic works. Because you think that you have a true interpretation of reality, but then just this one tiny little information would come in and then make your whole argument fall apart. And you're like, oh shit, I guess I was wrong on that one. I'm going to have to rethink this.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you a little bit was just around the kind of the state of YouTube, and I know that you've had some recent sort of run-ins in terms of like censorship, and what's your feel here, because you've been doing this for like quite a few years now, and on the one hand, something positive is happening, because otherwise we wouldn't be here doing this thing that we do, but then there is something that's encroaching in, which I know you had this negative experience around. Was it like a testing kit that you linked on?
Yeah,
on video?
I got a strike and the video got removed, and they're like, yeah, dude, this is illegal. I'm like, what? I appealed it and it got declined, and then I got my network partner to sort it out, and it eventually got sorted out and they removed it.
Oh, cool, man.
Thank God. But yeah, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's censorship, because it really could just be the way that the YouTube algorithm is done. I think so. Honestly, what I think it is that one of my more viewed videos is a trip simulation. So that whenever I release something that's not a trip simulation that a lot of people subscribe me for, they're not going to watch it. And so the click-through rate gets down and it doesn't get promoted. So I actually don't think it's a censorship issue. I think that was just my own screw-up of making a popular trip simulation, because that's not what my channel is about. I just made like 3. It really could just be a thumbnail title algorithm kind of thing. I just got to learn to play the game better. So I'm just choose to take more responsibility, because I don't think that YouTube is censoring psychedelic content necessarily. I think if anything, they're censoring. It is a little bit, but I honestly, I think that they're censoring more like controversial stuff, like political content and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So there's something going on there, and I think if there was an agenda against sort of psychedelics from the censorship angle, I mean, we'd just be wiped out pretty much instantly, because it's not hard to you could put in a few sort of keywords, find all psychedelic content, that'd be gone. So I think the fact that we're here, I think, still shows that that's not necessarily the agenda, but certainly some things have happened, and I think it's like you say, it's just a sort of an algorithmic glitch whereby something got penalized.
Like, I don't want to sweep it under the rug. I'm sure that sort of plays a part of it, but I guarantee you, if I just made, from now on, I just made videos of me just taking psychedelics on camera, I bet you it will get even more views, even though it's more dangerous and irresponsible. That's the sad reality of it.
It is, and I had that exact,
because it's what people want, and I'm kind of going through like, oh man, but I don't want to do that. That's the I don't. It's like with the psychedelics. If I kind of just dropped my morals and my integrity and just made silly videos, that would get more views than actually making like deep philosophical videos about integration or actually helping people and giving value. That just gets less views. It's just how it is.
But then you're kind of selling your soul then, and you're gonna end up sort of feeling like shit. So
I mean, for the long game, so it's all good.
Well, you just got to be in it for. I think, and again, this ties back to what we were saying at the beginning, which I really liked about how the creative element. And when I was watching some of your videos about when you were at Arcana and stuff where you're walking between the different buildings and the sort of the psychedelic effects that you put in, I was like, nah, that's nice, mate. So I think you've got to do something that you're proud of, that you can watch. And I think I know that when I make something where I think, oh, I've done a good job there, and also I make something like just what you're saying around the kind of the things about, just smoking something. I did a video where a friend of mine sent me some smokable Amanita muscaria, and so, but which is legal in Switzerland. So I thought, okay, I can do this on camera. So I tested it on camera. It was a 4-minute unboxing video. It took like zero effort, and it was just kind of like, here's this. I got sent this. Yeah, my most successful video this year. The views went like, for me, it was like, I think it's coming up like 100,000 views, which is for me insane. And I was like, this was nothing. I spent months on this video over here.
I know. The pains of being a YouTube creator. Yeah, but it's like you got to like balance these things out, because every now and again, like even with a trip simulation, for example, what inspires me to even do them every now and again is more just for the cinematography aspect of it. Now I'm like creating music, so I can just put my own music towards it. But I don't want that to be the only thing that I do, because then I would really be screwing my channel up. And then so it's all about the algorithm.
Yeah, but again, just be sort of true to yourself, and I think keep doing what you're doing, mate. I think
I am. Yeah.
who would have thought that any of us would have had any kind of audience at all ever? Just running our mouths out about crazy transcendent experiences. So something's going right, and I think your channel's awesome. I've been watching it for a few years now. What's the future then for the channel? Have you got any sort of particular directions, or?
I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I have a second channel called Raw Spirituality, which I created a couple years ago, and that was focused more on like Jungian psychology, spirituality, obviously. Going to go probably into more theology and religion, stuff like that. And yeah, that's going back on that channel, and I want to really work on that and put more energy and love into it, because then I feel like that's like the channel that I can talk about all the stuff that I'm really, really passionate about that has nothing to do with psychedelics. So then I have that outlet instead of just trying to force that content on my main channel, which just ends up screwing the algorithm up anyway.
Yeah, it's a tricky one too. I've come to that sort of point myself, where I'm thinking there's some stuff where it doesn't fit together, and yeah, it's kind of okay. Maybe even like long form conversations like this maybe would be sort of better over here compared to something like a 10-minute, like I say, trip report or trip simulation. It's all because that garners one audience and that garners another. So I've been sort of umming and ahhing whether just to start slicing things up or not, but I don't think I'm quite there yet. But I do watch some stuff on your second channel. I was kind of interested as to what where that separation was for you. So I guess the more sort of the thought experiment stuff, I guess, is what you'd put on the Raw channel.
Yeah, or even like recently the videos that exploded actually, and I got like lots of psychologists, all these people from university saying, "Hey, can I use your video?" And it's so funny because I was studying psychology and I quit university to do YouTube, and now all these university people are like using my videos for their classes, which is awesome, you know. But I really like the concept of the hero's journey and delving into archetypes and integration and kind of mixing in pop culture, because I'm like a movie nerd as well, so I like kind of mixing all that in. And I think
that's what I wanted to pick up, because I saw you one of your latest blog posts you did a reference to Jacob's Ladder, which is I love that film. I think there was that period in the 90s, I think it was, when Jacob's Ladder came out, when there was like Jacob's Ladder and The Exorcist 3 and just this sort of string of like, so there's something about that period where like really good dark movies are like just something that really taps into the darkest parts of the human psyche.
Yeah.
Jacob's Ladder, I love it. I think,
but at the end of the day, it had an underlining, very beautiful message behind it. You know, it wasn't just all doom and gloom, but it was really messed up. You just have to go through the journey. Go to the other side. And see, that movie, man, that's like religious as fuck, man. That whole movie is littered with religious analogies and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it is.
Well, Jacob's Ladder, obviously.
I mean, it's like a pure spiritual crisis. That's kind of it, and it's only at the end when he lets go of all that kind of the shit that was plaguing him. That is, he's kind of.
Or how his chiropractor represented the angel Gabriel. You know, that was really cool.
Yeah, but still putting the work on him, still making him go. It wasn't an easy ride with Gabriel. Yeah, great movie. Right, well, I mean, Tom, I think it's probably a good place to wrap it up, mate. So I just want to say thank you so much for sort of making time. I know you're a busy guy. Is there anything you want to sort of like say in closing, or like anything you want to point people to, or any events you've got coming up?
Actually, I'm still in lockdown, so I can't really go outside my country. But I will be actually exploring the beautiful country of Australia, meeting up with some friends and getting to know more about the Aboriginal culture, and just keep doing my thing, you know. So if you want to check us out, you can go on my YouTube channel or my website. But that's it, man. I really appreciate you inviting me on, and I hope that this conversation was fruitful and people got some golden nuggets, and it wasn't just me speaking out of my ass. So we'll see.
That's all we can ever. It was fruitful for me, man. And it's always, it's always nice just to it's simple as just connect with like sort of a fellow traveler, and it's like come a little bit out your bubble and hear somebody else's experiences. Some of the stuff you said today, I thought, I didn't think of it that way. So it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I really enjoyed it, and I can always tip my hat to somebody who appreciates the value of the word, mate. So cheers, dude.
Likewise, brother. I appreciate your work as well, and man, I hope you enjoy the rest of the month and have a Merry Christmas.
You too, mate. Yeah, it's always fun to have. Like I said, I've got 2 kids, so Christmas time's always a fun time. It was actually also like on the 1st of December, it started snowing here in Switzerland, and my kids went bananas. Like it was like, yes, snow. So yeah, it's so cool. Right, Tom, I'll let you get off, mate. Thanks so much, and just keep doing what you do, brother. It's awesome.
All right, brother. Peace out. Cool. Much love.